Amy, can you do any magic tricks?
No.
Me either. Not a one. But one of the most famous magicians, Harry Houdini, shared a bit of advice in a book that he published in 1910 called Handcuff Secrets. He said, "You will notice that some of these tricks are very simple. But remember, it's not the trick that's to be considered, but the style and manner in which it's presented. In other words, the presentation or the story behind the magic is the key to success."
I love that. Holland, you know we love good stories around here. And I do not have any tricks up my sleeves today, so I guess I'm going to have to work on my presentation skills. But as a young kid, I always loved the fairy tales. I was fascinated by magicians. And even as an adult, I just watched magic, and I love the stories of magicians. And I think the whole concept of illusions and the stories of psychic activity is fascinating. And when I think about how the mysterious transfers across time spans and generations and cultures, it truly is a universal phenomena.
Yeah, I think the earliest recorded evidence of magicians is from around Bible times. So, drawing on that history, we have an award-winning magician and author, a founding member of the International Association of Black Magical Artists, Rory Rennick, with us today. So welcome, Rory.
Hello.
And adding to our ensemble tonight is Angela Campbell. She is a USA Today best-selling author of a psychic detective series that was the top seller on Amazon Kindle in the romantic suspense and comedy division. So welcome, Angela.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Hi, I'm Holland Webb.
Hi, I'm Amy Boland.
And you're listening to The Afterword, a conversation about the future of words.
Both of you have interesting personal stories. So if you wouldn't mind, in just 60 seconds each, would you share the Cliff Notes version of your life and who you are? And we'll start with Rory.
Well, hello, and thank you for having me. I first would like to pay homage to my mother, who may have been the greatest magical influence in my life. I grew up in the housing projects in Columbus, Ohio. However, my mother never allowed us to know how poor we really were. I was the youngest of four until my mother remarried. Me and my older brother, we would often break it. We would break toys and explore just to find out how they worked. And so that curiosity continues today. I got my first magic kit in a cereal box, but with no guidance and no mentor, my interest fell off. Don't get me wrong, there were people and things in my neighborhood that were disappearing, but we didn't call it magic as such. Nobody came and pressed and digitized Larry Carr. They stole that sucker. But additionally, the prevailing presupposition for me to stopping my interest in magic was first from a religious standpoint, from my Judeo-Christian heritage. Magic was typically associated with the devil. Second reason why was from a psychological aspect. After a few years of college under my belt, and I was in the psychological and social services, magic wasn't, quote, like real enough for me. And then third, from a social standpoint, magic was just considered a white thing. So you didn't see very many Black people in doing that. But it wasn't until my divorce and I changed my worldview that reignited my interest in the art of performing magic. I started discovering Black magicians from the past whose stories never were sold. And so I've been on that journey, starting with Henry Box Brown.
Thank you so much. That's great. Starting with the cereal box. That's great. Angela, I love the series, the detective series Psych. Is that sort of similar to the kind of things that you write?
Yeah, actually, I love that show. I watched it before I even wrote my series. Talk about pressure after following Rory. I am, as Amy said, I'm a USA Today bestselling author, psychic detective series. My first book, On the Scent, actually was a bestseller. I've been a professional writer my entire career. I was a newspaper journalist for over 20 years. I did both writing, editing, pretty much everything. I've worked as a technical writer. I worked as a content writer. You name it, I probably at least dabbled in that, form of writing at some point. Creative writing is really where my passion is. Basically, I was that kid who spent a lot of time in La La Land. If I didn't have a book in my hand, or if I was engrossed in a movie, and if I wasn't doing either of those things, then, in my head, my mind, I was gallivanting around Terabithia or hanging out with Ponyboy Curtis. And kudos to any of you who actually get those references. So I think it was just my calling in life to make a career out of, writing weird little stories about extraordinary people.
I love that. And yes, I got all your references, Angela. Spot on.
Great.
Wow. Well, you all both, this is going to be a lot of fun as we talk today on the Afterword about magic and things that are mystical and why this is such a universal appeal to so many. And as we get started, though, I know Rory and I had talked a little bit about some of the differences in the words. And since on the Afterword, we like to talk about words, let's give this a quick definition round, and either one of you, Angela or Rory, just pop in, play off each other, whatever definition of this word you may want to come up with. But the first word is mentalist. Help us understand that.
I'll tackle that one. A mentalist in today's terminology would refer to perhaps someone who is a performing magician, who performs feats that apparently demonstrate extraordinary mental powers, such as mind reading, predictions, extrasensory perceptions, things like that.
Okay. Angela?
I will have to, bow to Rory's explanation. All I know about him in the list is, it was a really cool TV show that got canceled before I could get caught up on it. So I think it just kind of refers to, maybe someone who has really keen mental powers of observation, just, based on that show.
Okay, cool. How about psychic? I bet Angela's going to gobble that one up.
Yeah. Rory, feel free to jump in, but, in my research and my experiences, I think just the short answer is it's someone that, claims to have extra sensory perception, which means they can access information through channels that are kind of outside the normal, such as telepathy, which is essentially mind reading, or clairvoyance, which is like the ability to see the future or the past, or psychokinesis, which is the ability to move objects without, physically touching them.
There's a lot to that. I have no idea that you could unpack so much out of that word. That's amazing. What about you, Rory?
Oh, I'll let it rest at that because in my study I found the same thing. In fact, one of the magicians that I highlight in my book, Henry Box Brown, he would, as part of his performance, he would debunk those who claimed to have had actual psychic powers by reproducing some of the effects, but without crediting supernatural powers to it.
Okay. Interesting. All right. How about this one? Illusion.
A thing that is likely to be wrongly perceived or interpreted by the senses.
All right. So give us an example of an illusion trick.
Something that is wrongly perceived. It could be as simple as an optical illusion.
Okay.
Right. And then there's auditory illusions, as well as almost anything you could do in terms of your sensory input can be wrongly interpreted.
Fascinating. That's interesting. Yeah. How about you, Angela?
Again, I know David Copperfield is an illusionist. I think, Rory probably described it better than I could, for sure.
Oh, amazing. All right. How about this one? Paranormal. What do you think?
I'm going to defer to Angela on this one.
Okay. Well, I think it's kind of important to note, like, the words paranormal and supernatural kind of often get interchanged, but they're actually two very different things. Paranormal just kind of encompasses anything that we don't understand, or better yet, that, can't be explained by science. So that's not to say that it might not someday be explained by science. But for now, it's just kind of mysterious and inexplicable. And, supernatural is like any phenomenon that the human mind just simply can't grasp, because there's no natural explanation for it. So psychic abilities could certainly fall into the category of paranormal, because, it is possible that, some genius in a lab someday will be able to recreate those abilities and explain them. And the human mind is an incredibly powerful thing. So, for that matter, like Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster are paranormal, because someone might capture them and it can turn out that, Bigfoot's a big ape, or the Loch Ness Monster is just a big giant eel swimming around a Scottish, lake. You never know. So the term supernatural really is more in line with like religious experiences and mythology, sort of like resurrection and virgin births, or, Zeus shape-shifting into a magic eagle.
Okay. Wow. This is so helpful. I feel like I'm getting a better picture of our conversation today. And then the last term we're going to define is trick or deception.
I'll start, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
It's one of those words that can be used as a noun, a verb, or an adjective. As a noun, you think of cunning or skillful act, or a scheme intended to deceive or outwit someone. As a verb, to deceive or outwit somebody by being cunning and skillful. And as an adjective, it's intended or used to deceive or mystify, or to create an illusion.
Okay. Awesome. How about you, Angela?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's just basically convincing someone of something that's, not true, I guess, would be a good short way to describe it.
Yeah, I love that. Convince somebody that something is not true. These are so good. I am so excited about this conversation. And Holland, do you feel like you've got a little more savviness when it comes to magic and mystical things?
A little bit, but I'm interested now in a trick, right? Let's do it. Let's do a trick. Rory, if presentation is key to magic, then how do magicians make magic believable?
Well, I think what makes magic believable is the framing of the presentation. And sometimes the confidence of the audience that has in the entertainer, by taking away the apparent conventions of reason, science, and assumptions. The audience is left with only the conclusion that the impossible or near impossible has happened right before their eyes or ears. For example, a couple of weeks ago, and I want everyone to be very transparent, I talked with Amy, and I made a request, but because she was the host and I had begun talking with her, I didn't want to use her for this trick. I said, well, if we can get Holland to participate, this would be great, because this is actually an experiment, and if it goes right, then I'll look better than what I am. If it goes wrong, it's all Holland's fault. Okay, let's be real clear about that. He has big shoulders; he can handle this.
He does. This is going to be fun.
Well, just like radio waves that are invisible, there's a transmitter and there's a receiver. We wouldn't deny, as Angela was talking about, how some of these technologies can discover some abilities that we once would consider mystical or magical. But in time, we do develop certain abilities. I'm not saying that remote viewing is something that we can readily access, but the government is spending who knows untold fortunes to see if it actually happens. And for those audience members who might not know, remote viewing, seeing something that is happening in another place or time, usually within the present time frame, that you couldn't access by your physical senses. So I wanted to see if I could be able to transmit an idea, a card to Holland. And so I told Amy, here's the simple instructions: to have Holland to get a deck of cards, to select a card, not the ace of spade or a joker, because those are pretty commonplace. But I think it's especially interesting if he chose a card that meant something to him. And I don't know, Holland, did you do a card? Did you select a card that meant something to you, or just totally random?
It's just totally random.
It's totally random. Okay. So that makes it even more difficult. But
we have faith in
you. Well, don't get your hopes up too high, okay? The bar is about 2 feet high now. But before I did, I was hoping that I could signal him in some kind of way to guide him to a particular card. So right now I'm holding up a deck of cards, and Amy can verify that she can you see this deck of cards?
Absolutely. Excellent.
Right. And Holland, before we got started, what day did you choose the card? Did you know? How long ago? Was it just right before we started?
Just today. I just chose the card a few minutes ago.
And that's okay too, because sometimes I would have this done in advance and people would forget what they put into the envelope. Like it's 2 weeks later and they've totally forgotten. So it's probably a good idea that you didn't put it in there. But for right now, when I count to 3, I want you to hold up the card and say out loud the card that you selected today. 1, 2, 3. You can go ahead and reveal your card and say it out loud so the audience can hear.
4 of clubs.
The 4 of clubs. Now watch. Within this deck, there is one card that is different than the others. Can you see that?
Yes.
It's reversed.
It's reversed. No way. No.
And your card was the 4.
4 of clubs.
I wish he had chosen something else. It would have made this a lot more interesting. But I too.
Wow.
I have the 4 of clubs.
Oh my gosh. Holland, did you and Rory coordinate this?
No, not a bit. Not a bit.
Oh my goodness. Rory, you're killing me.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Thank you. I was sweating there for a moment.
Oh, thank you. That was amazing.
Oh my goodness.
That was amazing.
Well, thank you.
So all of our listeners need to understand that I'm about to go out of my skin right now because Holland is in South Carolina. Rory is in Ohio. And we are doing this via Zoom. This trick just happened beautifully. Well done. And when the question was, presentation is the key to magic, that presentation was spot on. Wow.
Yes. Amazing.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. This is great. Angela, as a writer, and I didn't realize you had all that background in your writing. For your fictional background and for your inspiration, it does say that truth is stranger than fiction. How did you get your psychic detective credibility? Where was some of your inspiration?
They say every writer has their own method or style of writing. And I tend to think of myself as like the human equivalent of the TV show Law and Order, like ripped from the headlines and all that. Which seems really strange if you consider what I write about. But maybe it's my background as a journalist, but every book I've written has either been inspired by like a news story or a real experience I had. My first book, Cry Wolf, is actually outside of the psychic detective series, but it's inspired by an urban legend called the Beast of Bray Road, which is like hundreds of eyewitness accounts in Wisconsin of people reporting this like werewolf-like creature running around cornfields. And that's like a true thing. You can look it up. But for my book On the Scent, which is the first book in my psychic detective series, I actually was at work one day kind of skimming headlines, and there was a headline that said Italian heiress leaves $10 million to stray cat. So I clicked on that because I thought that's ridiculous. You know, and of course, like her caregiver, the nurse, was kind of in charge of the money and the cat. So I just had the idea, like, you know, she's going to need a lot of protection. People are probably going to go after that poor cat. And then, so that just started, you know, the process of like, you know, it'd be really great. Like, what if the person she hires to be the bodyguard can actually talk to the cat, and would not be funny and cool. And so that's kind of like really how that series got started. And, you know, let me tell you, like, when that book came out, I got so much criticism and reviews from people saying this is unrealistic. No one would ever leave that much money to an animal. But just there's this thing called Google. If you Google it, you will find out it happens a lot. So it's kind of interesting. And, you know, I want to go back to like, because Rory mentioned remote viewing, and, you know, when you fall down the rabbit hole of researching psychic phenomenon, you know, there really are some interesting facts out there. Like, you know, the United States government, like the CIA, had a remote viewing program called Project Stargate. And they studied psychics, and they were trying to recreate those abilities so that they could get military intelligence during the Cold War. And, you know, they spent, I think, 23 years developing, and it only became unclassified in the 90s. And you wonder, are they still doing that? They probably are. So, you know, to really answer your question, I do a lot of research to try to give credibility to the things I write about, and to keep the stories grounded, and to ground those magical elements in some type of reality. And, you know, even my editor, bless her heart, she always says when she reads my synopsises, they just sound absolutely bonkers. But then when she reads the story, somehow I'm able to convince her that, you know, they could be true. So I guess I'm doing something right. I don't know.
Well, you know, Angela, it's almost like you just explained what Rory's card trick was with Holland. You know, Rory said, you know, it's a lot about framing and how much does the audience trust the performer. And you have to trust your story that you've just pulled from the headlines. And then being able to create some of that magical background to it, or the psychic background, is truly, you know, as you, the artist, has done this lovely presentation. I've read the beginnings of your first book, and it's fascinating. It's really funny too. I love it.
Thank you.
I can certainly verify that people leave large sums of money to stray animals. I remember years ago working for a nonprofit, and we had to wait for an estate gift until the owner's 3 cats died. They were all strays. They were wild, kept in a cage. And it was thousands of dollars that us and other charities had to wait for, because that money was used to care for these 3 stray cats. I remember one of them's name was Mary.
Oh, I love it.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah.
Angela, there's your next story.
All right.
Yep.
So how do these things, the mysterious and the magical and the unexplainable, how do they help us cope with everyday life?
Well, I believe that the world is that when the world is totally predictable and known in our psychological sphere, we become bored, frustrated, and sometimes in despair. To me, this is my personal opinion, that the magic, to me, is a metaphor. It's a reminder that more things are possible than we currently believe. The magician reminds us that the world is full of wonder and possibilities. We can even break the laws. Okay, the laws of nature. Civil disobedience is another kind of magic.
I think, you know, Stephen King said it best. He said, books are like a uniquely portable magic. When you pick up a book, whether it has magic or fantasy in it, it doesn't matter. If you pick up a book or watch a movie or listen to an audio drama, you get to escape your circumstances for a brief period, which can be an incredible coping mechanism for a lot of people who, are dealing with things that are very stressful and difficult. For me personally, I lost my mom to cancer when I was 12, and it was the hardest thing I had ever experienced. And, looking back, I didn't know how to cope at the time, but I learned to cope because I picked up a book I watched a movie, and those kind of became, my escape. And, anytime, I experience grief or stress or something, I find myself, doing that, and it really does help. And I actually had the chance to speak with a professor from Penn State University. His name's John Johnson. I was writing an article about this very topic, and I think he kind of explained it very well from a psychological standpoint. And, he said experiencing imaginary scenarios and in all kinds of media is generally good for us, because books and movies and storytelling, it stimulates our imagination, and it helps us to acquire new information about ourselves and about the world, and even possible worlds. Even as we're coping, we're learning or developing life skills through characters and stories that we read. So you never know, like suddenly elves could invade America, and won't you be glad that Tolkien taught us that extreme cold actually kills elves, or that Bram Stoker taught us that vampires can't enter your house without an invitation. So you know what I mean? It's good stuff.
It is good stuff. I mean, I don't think, for some of us who really wish we did have magical skills like flying, we don't want to have Pippi Longstockings jumping off roofs or anything, but I just love that. That's so wonderful. Great insight. Oh, goodness. All right. So as we wrap up our first episode with Angela and Rory, Rory, I'm going to start with you first. What is an essential element we need to know to understand the stories behind magic and the mystical?
I'm going to say magic as traditionally presented is similar to most conventional storytelling, as there is a protagonist / hero, usually the magician, but someone could be brought up on the stage as well, who could be the hero. And there is an antagonist, an enemy, like the laws of nature, or some seemingly insurmountable, dangerous obstacle, or in some cases, people's doubt or unbelief. That could be an antagonist in the storyline when presenting magic. You need an inciting incident and often a satisfying conclusion. Briefly put, in magic, the first part is the pledge, where the magician shows an audience an apparent ordinary object. It's in its unaltered state that sometimes can be handled or inspected by the audience, sometimes not. Part two is the turn, where the magician does something amazing or extraordinary with the object. For example, a vanish, change, cut in half, defying science, etc. And the last, but perhaps the most difficult part of this type of magic is the prestige. The prestige is where the object is restored or returned to its original state. So those are probably some of the most essential elements to me in magic being presented, because it is a storyline to me.
And is that where they get the whole term, the prestige in magic, like that bringing it back to its original status?
Correct. And that's just one framing of the storytelling.
Okay.
And that's a satisfying ending. Yeah. But in modern times, and I'm sure Angela could speak to this more than I could, we have this unwritten contract with our audience that we're asking them to suspend belief for a moment. Go with us on this ride, be moved, be terrified, be amazed, and we'll bring you back home safe.
Oh, that's beautiful.
But that's just one frame. But I'm sure Angela can tell us about a lot more different frames in storytelling.
I love it. That's beautiful. All right, Angela, what you got? What's an essential element?
I think, people are drawn to magic, right? I think it's like, Fox Mulder's poster in the X-Files that said, "I want to believe." I think that's all of us. We all are drawn to these stories about magic because, we're curious by nature and it's fun and exciting. But, I think ultimately, we all want to believe that we're destined for something special. Like we're the chosen one, like Harry Potter, and we can make a difference in the world around us. And I think that's why magical stories really resonate with readers so much. Stories about magic can be empowering to us, in our real lives. We want to believe we can do something special, but a lot of people don't believe that they have it in them. And the reality is they do. We all do. We all have the ability to make a difference in the world around us. And, whether we have superpowers or magical powers, sometimes it just takes us to reading a story about magic to, remind us that we can do good and we can make a difference in the world.
These are beautiful essential elements to help us understand. So thank you both so much. This is so much fun.
They really are. So many of these things I've never thought of before, but when you say them, it's like, oh, that makes sense now. Now I understand how the process works. So now I understand kind of what lies beneath the whole presentation of magic. So special thanks to Angela and Rory. This is a fantastic conversation. While you wait for part 2, please go to theafterwordpodcast.com and become a subscriber. You can leave us a review and tell your friends about us. And as always, you are welcome at our table.